How can one of the most legendary teams in the F1, Ferrari, end humiliated in his own home Monza? What is wrong with the SF-25 and why neither Leclerc nor Hamilton manages to dominate it? Ferrari arrived in Italy with an aura of constructed expectation. But Monza does not forgive mediocrity, and what he offered was a brutal mirror. From training, the limitations of the car began to manifest. The positive sensations were superficial, such as a stone cardboard facade that collapsed with each lap thrown. Leclerc managed to stay competitive on a return, but lengthening that career performance was a titanic task. For Hamilton, each curve was a reminder that the car still spoke a language that he did not fully understand. On Saturday, the classification left mixed signs. Ferrari managed to place his two cars among the top 10, but without truly threatening McLaren or Red Bull. There was speed, yes, but not consistency. No trust. On Sunday, the blow was deeper. In the middle of the career, the promises were diluted with the passage of the laps. Leclerc could only hold a fourth place, while Hamilton, penalized on the grille, finished sixth. Despite a visible effort, risky maneuvers, and clean piloting, the result was disappointing for a team that needed more than dignity. The contrast was painful because it was not a debacle for bad luck or human errors, but of a raw technical limitation. The stands full of tifosi saw their team be overcome without clemency by rivals that seemed to operate in another category. The roar that so many times pushed red cars towards glory this time was replaced by an uncomfortable silence, by the frustration of a hobby that no longer knows whether to believe in the promises of redemption. Because Monza is not just another circuit. It is Ferrari's spiritual home. It is the place where legends were forged, where unforgettable victories were held, and where each failure becomes a deep wound in the collective memory of the tifosi. And in 2025, that wound has opened again. Modern Formula One is defined by minimum margins and technical sophistication levels that touch the obsession. An out-of-place detail, a wrong interpretation in design philosophy, and a multi-million-dollar project can collapse. That is exactly what is happening with Ferrari's SF-25. Monza, more than a sports defeat, was the confirmation of a concept error. The car has structural failures that cannot be solved with simple touch-ups. It is a root problem. But in practice, the design failed where it hurts the most, in rigidity. The rear suspension fails to maintain the necessary vertical stability for proper work of the flat background. This translates into constant variations in the height of the body with respect to the asphalt, a nightmare for engineers seeking consistency in the generation of aerodynamic load. And in circuits such as Monza, where long lines demand a stable platform to maximize the downforce generated by the ground, this weakness becomes lethal. In other words, the car is unable to support an optimal balance during a whole classification turn or a career stint. Each change of direction, each aggressive braking, every moment of lateral or longitudinal load destabilizes the car. Pilots cannot trust the reaction of the SF-25, and that loss of trust becomes tenth. In errors, in frustration. Lewis Hamilton has been particularly clear about this. Accustomed for years to an extremely predictable Mercedes, the British heptacampion has confessed that piloting the Ferrari is like having to learn to handle again. The lack of predictability of the car, added to a braking system that does not respond as he wants, has limited his ability to extract the maximum of the package. The transition from the carbon industry to Mercedes brakes to the Ferrari Brembo has been more complex than expected. Hamilton, known for its braking precision, is now with a car that requires a completely different point of attack. A lethal combination that forces him to pilot out of his style, as he himself expressed. But the real problem is not that Hamilton needs to adapt. The real problem is that the car demands that adaptation to performance coast, which indicates that the philosophy of the SF-25 was not thought of with a wide range of piloting styles in mind. It is a car with an extremely narrow margin of operation, which penalizes even the best pilots if they are not exactly in the ideal performance window. And this is where the most uncomfortable question arises. How is it possible that Ferrari, with all its history, its resources, and its human talent, has failed in something as fundamental as the rear suspension? The answer is double. First, because the team assumed design risks that were not correctly validated on the track. Second, because the feedback process between track and factory seems to be broken. The ruling was already detected in March, but when arriving in September, it has not only been solved, but has worsened when facing more demanding traces. Ferrari is not facing an adaptation problem. It is facing a concept crisis. And the most alarming thing is that these types of errors are not corrected with a new spoiler or with an aerodynamic update. It requires deep redesign, rethinking the car architecture itself. And for a team that dreams of returning to the top, the time to do it is increasingly scarce. In a sport where every thousandth can define a season, aerodynamic updates are not simple new pieces. They are technical bets that summarize the philosophical address of a team. And when the margin of error is so small, any poorly calculated movement can aggravate the original problem. That is exactly what happened with Ferrari in Monza. Getting to Monza implies taking exam. Not only because the layout requires maximum efficiency and peak speed, but because for Ferrari, the GP of Italy represents a world show where each decision is amplified. The team reached the temple of speed with what was internally called as an extreme evolution package. It was not a simple modification of wings or cooling. It was a complete redesign of the posterior aerodynamic profile with a clear idea: minimally reduce the resistance to advance to maximize the speed in line. Ferrari introduced two rear wing versions. One was a revised adaptation of the package used in 2024, designed as a conservative option in case of imbalance. The second was an aggressive, minimalist version with plans almost cut to the limit of legality, designed exclusively to generate the least possible resistance. And in absolute terms, the update fulfilled its promise. Lewis Hamilton broke the speed record of the season, reaching 365 km/h. But there is successful. Because in Formula One, the maximum straight speed is just a part of the game. The key is the general balance of the car. And what Ferrari won in lines, lost it loudly in curves. The car became unstable, especially in high-speed braking, where the soil effect already committed to the structural problems of the rear suspension did not find enough aerodynamic support to keep the car anchored to the asphalt. The SF-25, with the new wing cut, suffered a phenomenon known as asymmetric porpoising. Small, inconsistent vertical oscillations that hindered precision in curve inputs. Leclerc and Hamilton reported erratic balance in mixed sectors, which forced them to compromise speed in curve to avoid traction losses or losses. In summary, the car became faster in line, but much more nervous in the rest of the layout. In addition, the new aerodynamic package forced a commitment that no team wants to have to take. Lower the load to the point of losing control just to gain a few tenths in line. Ferrari was caught in a tactical contradiction. If he used the aggressive specification of the spoiler, the car was ungovernable in curve. If I opted for the conservative version, they ran out of peak speed to defend or attack in Monza. It was losing on one side or losing for the other. The result was an unpredictable car, forced to operate outside its ideal performance window. During the race, this resulted in erratic behavior. Both pilots were vulnerable to the DRS of the rivals. They could not defend in line without losing tensile in curve, or attacking in a curve without running out of the long lines of the circuit. The SF-25 became a rolling paradox, fast but helpless. The 2025 Monza Grand Prix was not simply another disappointing career for Ferrari. It was a painful revelation, a public exhibition of a project that, despite the initial enthusiasm, was born with failures so deep that neither the talent of Charles Leclerc nor the experience of Lewis Hamilton have been able to hide. It was a weekend where excuses faded, where technical data spoke stronger than any corporate statement, and where it was clear that the problems of SF-25 are not circumstantial, but structural. And the most disturbing thing is that this is not a new story for Ferrari. It is a repeated pattern. Promises of evolution, striking presentations, ambitious objectives, and then, on the track, an obvious disconnection between what is said and what is really delivered. The Scuderia, which represents the very essence of Formula One, is trapped between its glorious past and its unharmed future. Hamilton's signing was undoubtedly a master play in terms of marketing, experience, and internal pressure to raise the team's standard. But even a pilot of his caliber needs a machine that allows him to fight. And if after 16 races he still feels that he is forcing his piloting to adapt to a car that does not respond coherence, then we are talking about a design problem, not adaptation. The question now is, what follows? Because Ferrari cannot afford another year of transition. The competition does not expect. McLaren continues to rise, Red Bull, despite its internal crises, keeps the competitive pulse, and Mercedes, with Russell and the promising Antonelli, is being restructured with intelligence. Each point lost in this phase of the championship will be a difficult blow to reverse later. It is a time of brave decisions. It is not enough to change ailerons or motor maps. Ferrari should question his entire philosophy. From the design of the chassis, the suspension architecture, the way in which the technical departments are communicated, to the leadership model that guides the development of the car. Are you designing for data or for pilots? Are they prioritizing aesthetics and simulations on the functional logic required by track? Do you think Ferrari can redirect the course of his season, or is it too late? Should they start thinking about 2026, or is there still time to save 2025? What would you do? Leave it in the comments.